Hey everyone, welcome back to Gamespot's coverage of E3 2019. It is day 2. We have a bunch of great games on stage. Baldur's Gate 3, Outer Worlds. We're going to be kicking it off shortly with Modern Warfare. I'm going to be here all day. I'm Mike Mahardy, here as always with Lucy James.
Hi.
And we are here with Joel Emsley.
Hey.
From Infinity Ward, working on Modern Warfare, studio art director. You've been bouncing back and forth kind of between Respawn and Infinity Ward for the past few years.
I guess you could say that.
But you're back
well,
doing Modern
bouncing,
Warfare.
I mean, 7 years.
Yeah.
And then
a slow bounce.
Another, we'll keep it that way. Nice big blocks of time to do a lot of good work.
Yeah. Well, so now you're back working on the Modern Warfare franchise. Is like a reboot accurate?
No.
No.
I think when you look at the trilogy of Modern Warfare, it ended in nuclear war, and you kind of ended up with alternate reality.
Yeah.
So when I heard that Infinity Ward was making Modern Warfare, I immediately wanted to come back to the studio and work on that. I was really interested in it. So when we came back, we took a look at it. What are we going to do? We considered a sequel, but it just didn't. We had nowhere to go. It was almost an unrelatable reality, almost an alternate reality. So the idea was to reimagine it like they would with like Nolan's Batman or Casino Royale.
Yeah.
And kind of approach it that way so that you had a lot more creative freedom to do something. And also make it more relatable. I mean, we can set this game in now. Like it's basically, it takes place now. But it continues on like the spirit of the Modern Warfare universe.
When you say that you want to make it more relatable, obviously we have a lot of games. I mean, Watch Dogs Legion, for example, it's set in a post-Brexit world, but they're very conscious about not wanting to get too political with any kind of message. Are you feeling that pressure too? Are you going to lean into the sort of more?
Yeah, I think I think it's at the end of the day, it's a first-person shooter, and it's supposed to be a fun game to play. But I think if you imagine that, or if you think that Modern Warfare has kind of stepped up a little bit, it's kind of grown up. So. The original trilogy was more based on like 80s action films and like tongue-in-cheek a little bit here and there. That was perfect for that time period or when those games were coming out. I mean, the last Modern Warfare that I worked on was 10 years ago. That's crazy to think. And then you had Modern Warfare 3, so that puts us at 8 years. So the franchise has been put to sleep for that long, almost a decade. And the idea is you wake it up now. And you're dealing with the struggles or the headlines and things that are happening today, but it's still inspired by it. It's more like Law and Order, like how they'd find inspiration and stuff and creatively integrate it into the universe. So inspired by, ripped from the headlines, sort of. But yeah, there's a struggle. You're always trying to balance the friction that you get with making something too much of a downer or too much of a drag. Like you're still trying to. It's supposed to be a fun game to play too, but. Raising the stakes would basically mean making things more relatable, and you start caring about characters a lot more. You do that through drama, and you do it through a good story. And it has to be believable and a little bit more grown up.
And with some of the stuff we've seen so far, and you've been talking about how one of your playable characters will be, I think in Infinity Ward's words, a freedom fighter. You're going to be showing a different side of the conflict. I imagine there's challenges in telling that kind of story as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have a character named Farah, which I think is really cool. And you actually, when you meet her, you start seeing her history and playing from her perspective, actually, which is really interesting. There's like a 20-year flashback to when she was a child, and there's an invasion that happens in her city, and you get to experience it from her perspective. And I think what's really interesting about Farah is that you really start seeing why she does what she does. When you're fighting with her as a character, you understand where she's coming from. But I think it's the Rebel faction of the game is just basically, it's a tradition of Call of Duty of like going back to the tier 1 side. Like we used to just kind of jump around, and you would have like the tight surgical stuff, and then you'd have like the big bombastic all out like weapons of like mass destruction, like crazy armor and stuff like that. So it's nice to counterbalance them that way. So you have the kind of the tighter tactical moments in the game, and you have like the bigger moments too.
You also we're revisiting classic characters, and it's a reimagining of Captain Price. What's it like to sort of revisit that character and put a different spin on him, but while staying authentic to the Price that we all know and love?
Captain Price was in the Call of Duty 1, and he dies in Call of Duty 1, and then when I joined Infinity Ward, it was Call of Duty 2, and Price made a comeback, but because it was a prequel, and he played a larger role in that. So that was his. By the time we got to Modern Warfare, I had the assignment to kind of bring Captain Price back, and I had this whole thing where I'm like, really? Like, what? I thought he died here, and they're like, no, just bring him back. So by now, I think if we're talking incarnations, I think I've said 2 incarnations, but we're on the 3rd incarnation of Captain Price. But this time it's different. We're actually doing full motion capture and performance capture with these characters, and we used to just take Captain Price or a character like Captain Price and draw them up, concept them, and then assign a voice actor to it. So this time it's played by Barry Sloan, and Barry's gone through SEAL training. He's a really, really cool guy. And he's done his best to kind of pay homage to Billy Murray's Captain Price beforehand, but seeing characters, having them actually act through and through. I mean, Captain Price looks like Barry. We captured him. He just has the beard and everything too. But it makes a huge difference in kind of relating the story to the player and actually making you feel like you're with a badass or like these characters. Or if it's a villain, you really start hating the villain because the actor and the actresses are really able to act into the game and really show it up.
Call of Duty 4, the original Modern Warfare, is kind of like set the standard for this multiplayer progression that's become the most pervasive thing in modern games. How do you return to Modern Warfare, or at least the name, and like you're coming back to Infinity Ward to work on the game? How do you return to that and also figure out a way to evolve that formula?
It's incredible. I think I can't go too much into it, but we have there's some key players from Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4. Jeff Smith, Alex Roysowitz, key map designers. Jeff is a game multiplayer director now. What I've observed and been involved with on supporting that effort was it's been ripped down to the studs and rebuilt up, all with this new engine that we have too. So I think the trick is to Mark Grigsby's back on the weapon handling and all that stuff too as the animation. So I don't know how to describe it. When I pick up this Modern Warfare, there's something about when you get all these people and new people together in the right way, the DNA is there, and it just feels like a Modern Warfare. The handling, the smoothness of the controls, the way the gun reacts, and then you do stuff to that to make it additive to next level it. So, I mean, I could say right now that just in the weapon handling that we did things like adding motion blur to the recoil, which makes it feel more visceral and cool. There's more tactical reloads. I'm spilling a little bit of beans here, but I'll say it anyway. When you're aiming down sight, we made it so that you don't have to come off the sight picture. There's just little things like that. But I guess the point is that you take everything that we had before that made it great, and you build on it and make it additive. But you can't destroy the things that people loved about it in the first place. Right. It's tricky.
It's a tricky balance.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the new engine. So it's been in development, obviously, for some years. What is that bringing to Call of Duty? And is this going to be the engine that all future iterations across the studios are going to be working with, or is it just an Infinity Ward proprietary engine?
I don't know the answer to that. I think the focus for us has been, the engine was in development for about 5 years now. It was in development before Modern Warfare started, and I mean it. I don't know about the other studios. The focus is on Modern Warfare right now. So I don't know what the future holds for it, but it certainly gives us the ability to do some things that I never dreamed of. I mean, we have reactive cloth sim in the characters, and when they're walking and run around, like that. We talked about the ghillie suit yesterday, where it actually, when they get up and stand up, things are moving the way you would see it. Atmospherics play a huge role in this game in making it not only look realistic, but also being able to identify targets in an environment, which gets really tricky in these games. The higher fidelity games get, sometimes you can go too far with the noise. And atmosphere plays a huge role in knocking down the tones and the temperatures and how things stack up in the environment dimensionally. And it's crucial in a first-person shooter, multiplayer, single-player, spec ops, to get all those to feel right when you're actually engaging targets. It plays a huge role in that and actually, not frustrating people. And then the last thing is, there's more. I could go on forever. We introduced photogrammetry, which is reality capture, into the game. And we use that to kind of veneer the environments and make them feel more realistic. We have new mechanics in the game, like being able to mount up on a corner or a sill or like vertical and horizontal. And when you get up close to things like that, you expect a level of fidelity. And so we have new things like we're adding the photogrammetry in there. We're doing things like this thing called micro tiling, where you get almost like you're used to looking at like 16 pixels per inch. I'm totally geeking out right now. So the old windowsill would be like 16 pixels per inch. Now we're looking at nearly 64 pixels per inch with micro tiling, and so you use that to make it so that when we're doing these new mechanics and getting really close and intimate with the environments, it holds up at that distance.
This is kind of a like multi-tiered question, I guess, but as art director and as someone like attached to a lot of different parts of the design, Call of Duty as a series, like not just Infinite Warfare, it's been going toward this futuristic, progressively more futuristic each time. But now you're going back to more like, I don't want to say traditional because like the series started in World War II, but Modern Warfare is traditional compared to nowadays. From an art perspective, does that like kind of just going back in time allow you anything that you couldn't do with the sci-fi stuff? Because sci-fi just gives you kind of like, it's a veneer that you can kind of maybe use it as an excuse if you want to talk about like story things also.
You start getting into space magic and and that's fun. There's nothing wrong with that. I got a lot out of the experience working on more fantasy science fiction stuff in the last 7 years and brought that into Modern Warfare. So I used to do a lot of maquette making and kit bashing and things with model kits and things to get certain looks, but since we moved into reality capture, I went from 1/6 scale to 1:1 scale for this game, and I started encouraging the art department to kind of take part in Hollywood style kit bashing with costumes. And we have an actual wardrobe at Infinity Ward now. All the costumes, and then you look at the gear and stuff. So I guess you could still come at it from a Hollywood perspective artistically. But I think that there's still gameplay and things like that to kind of answer to mechanics and things. We keep it as real as possible, but there's still stuff like, I don't know, maybe you would see a heartbeat sensor in the game or something like that. But what we do is try to take things like that and grind it down to something that looks like it belongs in a real steel armory.
Does that like retread to more current times kind of feel limiting at all, or is that a good limiting, like whether it's through gameplay or art or story? Because like now again with the story you don't have that sci-fi thing to say, oh, it's sci-fi. It's not like we're not like Modern Warfare, you're literally saying, oh, it's kind of happening now, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know, does that constraint breed creativity, or does it feel pretty limiting at a certain point?
It breeds creativity, I think. I mean, I like having the constraints of reality on us, and I like the way that I like when things have to feel physical, and you have to figure that out. So something like, let's say we have let's say we have a wheeled drone running around. You see them all the time in military documentaries and stuff like that. But we would have to like build something like that and explain it and design it so that it fits our universe. Every part on it has to be believable. So I guess you have a fantastic visual library to draw from and still work with it. I think you still have a lot. I mean, you look at something like Sicario and how visually creative that looks to me. I don't feel any restraints on it. I think it's still entertainment. It's still art. I was asked the other day about a character that we have in a level that we're showing behind closed doors here, and this big character booms in the room, and we could have just made that soldier look kind of normal, but I chose to make it more of a metaphor. So we chose this huge. One of our character artists is actually a professional or a competitive bodybuilder. So I said I want this character to come into the room and be memorable, and so we kitted him out and scanned him and got him in the game, and it changed from this moment where it could have been super realistic and constricting and kind of not as memorable and too realistic. And we took a moment, and I think we made it way more memorable by upping the costume and taking a little bit of creative freedom. So I guess what I'm saying is, even in reality, you still have a lot of ways to go with making it memorable and being free and really exploring things.
To take a step back, earlier you mentioned, flirting with Hollywood in terms of techniques and inspirations. And Call of Duty is one of those I guess, rare franchises that has really hit the mainstream. Like, you can talk to anyone and they will know what Call of Duty is, and that's kind of fed into having celebrities be in the game. So obviously Kit Harington as the most recent example. Are we going to see any kind of really famous faces coming to Modern Warfare?
I'm sorry?
Any kind of huge celebrities coming to Modern Warfare?
Not that I know of or can talk about now. I mean, we have our main cast.
Yeah.
We have Barry Sloan, Claudia Dumit. I'm trying to remember everybody's name. Chad Michael Collins. We have my last one, Elliot Knight. So I've got my four main cast there. They've been. I mean, they're celebrities on their own and been doing things, but you know, I think it's in service of the narrative.
Yeah. So it's more like. Can you imagine, you know, a few years ago when every game had some celebrity attached, it was a bit weird.
Yeah.
And then you kind of get huge celebrities appearing in games and actually, you know, like Keanu Reeves in Cyberpunk.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's kind of just become
I
rarer
freaked
and
out
rarer
like
now.
everybody else. That was awesome.
Yeah, that's probably one of the bigger surprises of the show so far. Joel, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with the months leading up to the release of Call of Duty Modern Warfare. And if you're watching at home, we will be right back after a very short break with Oculus's Jason Rubin. See you then.